dear.
That's because I'm putting it up all the time.
Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Hello.
Lovely to see your beautiful faces from 5 different countries in I don't know how many different time zones. Now, I know that some of you already know each other, and some of you, this is the first time. So whether you're an old timer or you're just seeing some whole new faces, just wave to the screen and say, good morning, good afternoon.
Good evening.
There we go. So welcome to the first call of the Way of the Archetype. Lots of exciting things planned for you over the next few weeks. First of all, thank you for being on time. Jean Booth, who is also part of the program, has asked me to send her love to you all. She's got a trip today, so she will join us next week. And I also know that somebody else would be calling in from their car as she's driving from the way to work. She says she didn't want to wait. She really wanted to get to the stuff. And also some people might be joining us a few minutes late. However, since you are here, we will get going straight away. I see we have a dog joining us, which is very sweet. I see some new hairstyles. I like that. Eddie, suits you, man. It's been a while since I've seen you. Yay. All right, so the Way of the Archetype, what is that all about? Now, hopefully you've read your bits that I suggested, pages 1 to 8. But even if you didn't, some of you just slipped in at the last minute. That's okay too. I will set you off on the right foot pretty soon. Now, as you might know, a lot of this archetypal work is based on the work of a man by the name of Cliff Barry, who created shadowwork.com. Thanks for the vacuum. I'll just mute you on that. Don't need that today. Manage participants, mute all. Okay, most of you, if not all of you, have been on some of my calls before. So I mute you to create a better quality recording. And if you need to or want to speak at any point, just unmute yourself and speak up. There's no need to raise your hand or wait for me to finish because you know that might be a while. So once I'm on a roll, I kind of get going. So just unmute yourself and start speaking if there's any questions, anything you want me to repeat. So Cliff Barry, an amazing man that I met a few years ago. And so a lot of what's in the document comes from his work. He was kind of my first introduction to shadow work and this whole concept of archetypes. And so on that score, some of you might be very familiar with archetypes. I know we have at least one certified shadow work facilitator, Diana Fitzpatrick. I know Robert Barker from England is also familiar with shadow work and with archetypes. And there might be others of you that I don't know specifically that has an awareness of what this stuff's about. So if you are an expert already or you know a lot, please appreciate that this is Benny's interpretation. It's not the way, it's not the right way, it's just a way. So I ask you to suspend your critic and just go with the flow and see what you might learn, put it into practice, and then see what happens. So enough of me for now. It's time for you to check in. So in a minute, you will be divided up into groups of more or less 3 people in a room. Let me just do that quickly. So there'll be 7 rooms of 3. Perfect. And you have a couple of things to do. So you might want to write them down unless you have a good memory. There are a couple of things you need to do as soon as you get into your group. The first one is to introduce yourself in a sentence. So that typically does not start with, well, I was born in 1969 on a farm. And my dad was a dairy farmer. Interesting, not today, right? Tell that story to your book club. So one sentence, maybe your name, maybe what you do, maybe something about you, maybe where you live. You have free choice to decide. One sentence to introduce yourself. If you are in the audience and the person starts with 1969, you stop and go, One sentence, okay? Start exhibiting your leadership. The next, so after you've introduced yourself, there will be a group discussion between the 3 of you about what is archetypes. What do you understand? What does the word even mean? What do you think archetypes are really about? Maybe you come up with some examples of archetypes, just having a 3-way conversation about archetypes itself. And you will have a total of 10 minutes for the entire exercise. So that means you should have about 8.5 minutes to talk about archetypes and 1.5 minutes to introduce yourself. Those of you not familiar with Zoom yet, right now, there should be an invitation on your screen. As soon as you accept the invitation, you go off into a private room that nobody else can hear, and that's also not recorded. please stay in that room until you are automatically brought back. You'll get a notification that says you've got a minute left, and then you will automatically come back here. Please do not exit the room on your own. Wait till you come back here. Who's unassigned? Oh, there we go. Have an all. There we go.
Right. I can.
Okay, I've got it.
Yeah, he said I can hear you now.
Benny, you're muted. Benny, can't hear you.
Ah, I thought you could all lip read by now. You would think I would know how to do these things by now. So welcome back. I've just muted everybody again, so please unmute yourself at any point you want to chip in. So let's go through that. I heard some interesting things in those of you that I did get to. I peeked into some of the meeting rooms. What did you come up with? What do we mean when, or what does it mean to you when we talk about archetypes? Let's hear it. Anybody?
Well, we discussed archetypes, and at first, like, I mean, we know a little bit, but not that much. And we came up with terms like, well, it's an energetic construct, and it's kind of like where your personality is at the time, and the theme, the aspect of yourself that you are at that moment. And we change archetypes depending on what goes on. And we can have one archetype that we are, you know, maybe a little bit unbalanced in, and we discussed what the outcome of that might be, and how we balance them out. So we were kind of playing around with the idea of archetypes and what you do with them.
And
like complete knobs.
Leslie, if you're willing to share in the group, what was the example you came up with? You said you were this today and you were that today. You mentioned those.
Oh, yeah. So I'm known for my schmoozing at work. I'm a recruiter, and so I'm an internal recruiter, and I schmooze all my managers. But there's one that really annoyed me today. So my warrior, I think it was my inner warrior came out, and I got quite really testy. And my manager was like, "Oh my God, who is this? This is not Leslie. Oh my God!" And she sat down and she said, "That's not like you." I said, "It's not, is it?" And internally I went, "Oh, we need to reset."
So what Leslie actually said in the meeting room is one moment she was kind and the next minute she was a bitch. That's what she actually
said.
said.
That's what I said. Yeah, one moment I was really kind and schmoozy. The next time, and I was a bitch. I was being a bitch. And I'm never a bitch. So it was kind of interesting.
Of course you're not. Today was the no. Okay, anybody else? What did you come up with in your group?
Really something that I raised is the idea of what is the difference between an archetype and a hero. So, for example, I was speaking about a workshop I went to years ago where the person was speaking about fairy tales and the archetypes in fairy tales. Mm-hmm. And how children are fascinated by the archetypes and never question them. Yeah. According to this person, nobody says, you know, what is a king, for example, or a queen.
Yes.
And the person was saying it is so important to nurture these archetypes in a child's unconscious. And that it's very important not to introduce myths and legends until a child is, I think it was about 8 or 9 years old. So the idea of heroes comes later, kind of thing. And that it's so important that the archetypes are first rooted. And that little sort of talk has in the midst of the workshop has always stayed with me in a mysterious sort of a way, in terms of we live in external reality, and so this is a house and this is a car, and in internal reality I've not really ever thought about what lives there and can be encountered or woken up or nurtured. And that perhaps archetypes are an internal construct that we either enliven or don't.
I think, thank you, Sharon. So you will all see, if you haven't yet read the whole manual, this internal construction. What is the word you just used? We either nurture or do something else, Sharon?
I can't remember what I said, but I suppose we either nurture it or we're unaware of it.
We either enliven or don't.
Enliven.
You said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to know some people are actually listening. Enliven or we don't. Okay, because that's going to be pivotal when we come to the understanding of what we might call balanced archetypes, and then the way Cliff calls it, the deflated or the inflated in every archetype that there is. This concept of enlivening it or not is going to become more important. Anybody else? Another group? What came up? Unmute yourself, bottom left. Yes, Liesel.
So we discussed the concept that it's almost like a blueprint or a cookie cutter type of energy that has some elements that we can either step into or not.
Okay, I like
and for some,
two things there. There's the blueprint, and it's that you can step into it or not. Okay. What else?
And that for some of us, some of that energy was, well, I'll use the word killed, or what to use it, but like, let's say deflated in your language, with experiences in childhood, like we go, I see something like that and it's overinflated and it just can't be like that. So that energy is smaller in us.
So I'll say here, some are okay and some aren't. We learn, as you say, very young, that some archetypes just, it doesn't really work so well for my caregivers. They don't like it when I'm in that archetype. I get hurt in this archetype, or I get made fun of in that archetype, and so on. Good. Anybody else? I was just, sorry, I didn't explain that. Rob, I'll be with you in a second. So most of you are probably seeing a whole lot of faces on the screen. One of those faces is the flip chart. It only focuses on the flip chart, so you don't have to worry about the flip chart behind me. I can move it anyway a little bit. It's going to be hard for me to write in that way. So if you want to only see the flip chart, those of you that like looking at my works of art, you can click on the, oh bugger, so it doesn't really seem to work. Oh well, we're doing the best we can. So, Rob.
Hi. So I think I've just kind of thinking on this, and I didn't quite have this as the language, but I would see it as aspects of the psyche that are given characterization, and so they're very specific characteristics to, almost like characters with specific characteristics.
Okay, brilliant.
And I could find it useful as like a roadmap to be like, well, which character am I being, and is this appropriate for the situation? And maybe I might need a bit more of a different character to come and help me in this situation.
Cool. So a very important aspect that this is kind of what Rob just said in different words, is the crux of our time together. Because it is about seeing how different archetypal, let's call them ways or traits or characteristics or attitudes or whatever you want to call it, how we can use different ones to really truly meet the client where they're at, because when we can meet anybody where they're at, we can form a connection. When my client doesn't respond to my NLP technique and I'm all stumped because they're supposed to say yes and they're saying no, then we typically go, oh, well, the process didn't work, I didn't work, or the client got it wrong. That's not meeting the client where they're at. If we can truly meet them in the strength that they are showing in this moment, and those of you not familiar with the concept of strength, may want to chat to Liesl Teversham offline. She's an expert in Strength Finder, so really helping you see which of your strengths are the highest and which ones are at the bottom, which is why things are probably quite hard for you. So good. Thank you for that, Rob. There's time for one more. Somebody who hasn't shared yet today. What are archetypes? I might pick on someone. We haven't had somebody from Emmy's, Jane's, and Shirley's group. I'd like to hear from one of you. If you shared recipes, let's get the recipe.
For me, and I've done Carolyn Meiss's Archetypes, but I don't think I'm any the wiser. For me, it's that we've all was just where I was at, I think. To me, it's we've all got all the archetypes. It's when they were encouraged as children and when they weren't. When they were brought forward and when they weren't. So we might recognise some archetypes, but we mightn't recognise others because they were dormant within our childhood socialisation with parents.
Exactly. So another key there, we all have access to all of them. So the next time that you tell yourself you couldn't possibly do what someone else did, you are simply lying. With well-intended, I'm sure well-intended. But we can all become murderers and liars and pillaging and raping and whatever else other people do out there. We all have access to these archetypes. And of course, the other side to that is if I'm telling you that you can be a murderer and I'm telling you you can be, given the right circumstances, you will kill without thinking about it once. If that side of the argument is true, then what's also true is you can be as magnificent as anybody else there that you are projecting your magnificence onto. So you can also step into the archetype of the winner or the presenter or the teacher or the leader or the whatever the thing is that you think you are the only one that cannot possibly do that. Good. So these flip charts, at the end of today's call, I'll create a Facebook group. I'll put the flip charts on there. I'll put the video on there, and I'll send you a link to the audio that you can download and keep for those of you that want to do that. Good. This morning I was sitting outside. You know, nowadays you can tell when Cape Townians are in a good mood is when it rains, because we have been desperately needing rain. It's like a whole weird thing that happens. Everybody is almost like winning the World Cup in 1995. I know we still go on about it, but this is all we have. So I was sitting on the balcony loving the rain, and then suddenly I started thinking about the English language. And I was thinking, my friend Carol, who runs a special needs school she runs several schools in Turkey. She owns them. She always said to me that English is one of the hardest languages to learn. I was like, that's ridiculous. I speak it without thinking about it once. She goes, yes, English has more exceptions than rules. So I was thinking this morning as I was sitting here on the balcony overlooking the mountains and the pond and the rain, that the plural of teeth, or the plural of tooth is teeth, but the plural of booth isn't beef, it's booths. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Imagine having to explain to somebody new to this planet that sometimes the word R-E-A-D means read and sometimes it means read. And how do you know? Well, you just have to figure it out based on the context in a nanosecond before you pronounce the word. It's crazy. It can never work. It's like the internet. It can never work, right? The alphabet can never work. It's too many letters. It's confusing. Yet all of you speak the English language and all of you are able to, as far as I know, read and write. And the archetypes is exactly the same way. So I'm here to tell you that if you can read and write and understand the English language, you can understand this information and not just understand it, but actually apply it with your very next client session. Some of you are going to be overwhelmed with all the information in here. We will do practical, right? Today is kind of scene setting and getting into the context of what we are doing. Once we get to the individual archetypes, you will get to practice these things because the only way you're going to ever put them into practice is by practicing them. So know that we will get there to all the details and you will be able to get it. Now, also the Facebook group that I'm creating is also the place to go with your insights, to go say, hey, I did this with a client today and it actually worked, or I tried this and it backfired spectacularly. What the hell am I doing? And so once you get the answer to that question, publish it because nobody really knows what they're doing, so they might learn from you. In terms of the manual, if you did print it, I'd like you to write something on the first page. First thing will be your name. Write down your name and then a comma. Write your name and a comma. And then write these words. You are truly. So your first name, comma, you are. If you don't have the manual, find a piece of paper or type it up. You are truly. And then you write something about you that you know deep down is actually true, but you find it almost unthinkable to say that about yourself, like truly amazing, truly magnificent, truly creative, truly caring, truly intelligent, truly artistic. Something about you that's just more true than all the other BS you've been telling yourself for the last 5 decades. Not that I do that, of course. I'm just observed that you do. That's why you need someone like me, and that's why I need people like I do. All right. I'd like to hear from 2 or 3 of you. What did you actually write down? If you're finding this hard, you've got tapping work to do, right? You know that. If you cannot start owning the gold about you, you have a deflated sovereign. We're going to look at the sovereign next week, so it'll all make sense to you. And I'm going to meet you where you're at. If you haven't come up with something because the concept is unthinkable, then write something you would like to be true about you. What would you like to be able to say and really mean it and believe it? So I'd like to hear from 2 or 3 of you. What did you write down? Unmute yourself, bottom left, and let's talk.
Shirley is truly magnificent.
Shirley is truly magnificent. Aaron. Unmute yourself, bottom left.
I wrote, I'm truly intelligent.
You're truly intelligent. Thank you, Elizabeth. Aaron, does that sound happening?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
I am truly gifted.
Now, imagine if kids were growing up in a world where they were encouraged to believe that stuff about themselves, hey? I'm just saying. All right, so you are going to go into your same breakout rooms again, and this time you'll have 5 minutes between the 3 of you, and your job is to discuss what is hard about clients that don't seem to shift. What are your difficulties? What are your challenges? What is the self-talk? How do you pull your hair out of your head? What happens to you when you have a client that doesn't seem to be shifting, or a client, I don't know if you sometimes, it's very rare, but sometimes I'll meet somebody or I'll have a client and it's just like we're not really connecting. I say this and they say that, and I mean this and they understand that. There's just kind of some discombobulation going. So maybe if you've had some of those clients, or just clients that don't seem to shift in the way that you want them to shift or in the way that they expect to shift. Talk amongst yourself about what that's like for you, where you go, and what is hard about those types of clients. In other words, what might be hard is that every time they come back, it's almost as if the previous session didn't happen. Or what's hard is they don't answer your questions in the way that you ask. Or what's hard is they cry nonstop and you never get to speak to them. Or what's hard is that they speak all the time and they never get to shed the tears. Whatever has been your experience of difficult clients or clients not getting the results you want, same breakout rooms as before. Please wait in the breakout room until you are brought back here automatically. You should have the invitation on your screen. Please click on it now, and then I'll see you back in 5 minutes. I'll pop into your rooms from time to time.
Benny, unmute yourself. Benny, can't hear you.
I need help.
Better.
Thank you. So stretch the body in any way that it might want to. Deep breath in the nose, out the mouth with a sigh. And do some energetic movements with your arms or your legs. Kind of get that blood flowing. I know for some of you it's evening time. Good. And if you want to start taking some side bets on the odds of me unmuting myself next time before I speak, please start that running in the background. Okay, so what happens with you and your client? Ellie is offering 10 to 1. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Ellie. All right, so what came up in your group? Please unmute yourself like I just modeled for you, and then let's talk. Who's next?
In our group, feelings of kind of being overwhelmed, a bit lost, hopeless, kind of wishing the session, how long would the session last, or when will it end, kind of thing.
Yes, those never-ending sessions. The hour becomes like 5 hours. Thank you, Megan. Who's next?
Self-doubt and feeling out of our depth.
Yes, the self-doubt thing. It's all about you. Yes. If only I did something different, then it would work. Self-doubt. Good.
Our group had frustration.
For sure. Frustration with or about?
Frustration that it wasn't going where they needed it to go to, and that the client wasn't cooperating, kind of thing.
Okay, so there's frustration, I say, with it, the fact that it doesn't go where it want to go, and also with the client. And on one of those days, it might even be with yourself. All right, who's next?
Not
Confused.
Go ahead.
Not feeling good enough.
Not good enough. Yes. Next.
Confusion.
About?
Confusion is to when you think that they've had a shift. I've got one like that. They think they've had a shift, and you think they're on the right track. They disappear for a while, and they come back in the same state as when they first came to see you.
Yep. So we might also say, exactly. It's like, should I give you your money back? So, no, you shouldn't. I'm just saying that's the question that runs through our minds sometimes. No change. All right. Anything else?
You feel like that you're letting the client down.
Huh. Okay, time for one more.
Inadequate.
Say again, Sharon.
Overwhelm.
Overwhelm. Okay. And there's somebody else also wanting to say something.
Inadequate. I think you might have written that already, Benny.
Well, it's another word.
Or not good enough, I suppose. Yeah.
No, it's slightly different. I'll write that down. Inadequate. So, I mean,
expectations.
Expectation what?
Expectations.
What about expectations?
When I first was, I'm still practicing, so I'm certifying, but I always expected my clients to be sobbing or in tears, or the tears to arrive. And when they didn't, I was quite shocked.
So are we saying expectations not met?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we think we know what needs to happen, and when it doesn't happen, we have some disappointment that our expectation is not met. Okay, good. So thank you for that. So the next group exercise will be, well, in that case, if this is what happens when our clients are not getting the shift that we would like them to, it affects us and it affects them. Now, when it affects us and it affects them, then it cannot not affect the next session. When you have the story going, when you have some self-doubt going, whatever self-doubt is, and you start feeling inadequate, then I'm telling you, you're not at your best at the beginning of the next session because you're already concerned about that client. I've had clients where when they cancel, I go, hallelujah. I'm so glad they're not showing up today. Now, if they didn't cancel, that's not a good place to meet a client, right? There's some stuff in here, in this mind body, that is not going to help the session. We are not at our best when we are emotionally stressed in any way, shape, or form. It is virtually impossible to be open to what is and go with the flow and all that stuff if you are not feeling good and centered inside yourself. There is an exception, though. And the exception is in the 29 pages that hopefully you have printed out. Because these 29 pages will tell you exactly what to do when a client presents like this. Then that's what you do so that the rapport can happen even if initially you doubt yourself. These are the things you can do when you feel stuck, or the client feels stuck, so that you and the client can become unstuck. So the next part, you have 5 minutes for this between the three of you, is in that case, if this is true that you just told me, and it is, what would be the benefits of having a step-by-step, very detailed framework to work with clients who are not getting the results you want, and maybe even with the clients who are getting results to help them get better results? What would be the benefits of having a framework for you to use? The invitation is on your screen. You got 5 minutes. Tia, welcome to the call. I'm just going to add you to group 1. So there'll be one group of 4 and the rest are all groups of 3. Please accept the invitation on your screen. And I'll see you back in 5 minutes. Ha! I've unmuted myself. Ha! Yay! One of those 10-to-1 odds now. All right. So curious that what came up in your group. What would be the benefits of having a framework? Unmute yourself. Let's talk.
Well, we just decided that it would be wonderful. It would be really helpful to have something that if you know you're going into a session with someone that was, in inverted commas, difficult in the last session, you could prepare yourself by making sure you were in the right frame of mind, archetype to meet them where they're at. So it would be awesome.
Fabulous. Gives you the opportunity to prepare for a session. And we'll see later today the paradox between preparing and being in the moment and how they are not mutually exclusive. How they dance hand in hand, preparing and letting go. It's absolutely two sides of the exact same coin. Anybody else?
Yes, for me, I think this would take us deeper, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So I was saying that very much within me, the way that I work is I'm very aware of archetypes within myself. So there's an inner awareness. As a therapist, you need to look and see what archetypes are functioning within you so that they don't actually hijack the session. And so it takes things very much deeper for me. You can work more deeply with your clients and you can work more deeply with yourself. And hopefully magic happens.
So that's beautiful. And also what will become apparent pretty soon is that this is a two-way street. We are talking absolutely about which archetype is showing up most for the client right now, and therefore which archetype would be most beneficial to the client and myself for me to move into. So it's the both sides. It's our archetypal energy and how I'm going to position myself based on what is presenting or presented by the client. Here's one way to look at it. I was thinking yesterday about an analogy. If you go with a dance partner and you go dancing and they are playing a foxtrot and you insist on dancing a waltz, it's not going to look that good, right? It's not going to work. You're going to confuse your partner. There's going to be a mismatch. You're going to step on toes, probably literally. It's not really going to work. And there's no point saying to the band, but I wanted a waltz, right? They're playing a foxtrot, buddy. If you don't like the foxtrot, get off and go sit on the side bench. But if you want to dance, which is what I believe we do with our clients when we do it well, you got to play to the music. And in this case, the one who's providing the music is the client. So I can prepare my whole playlist of what we're going to dance to today. And the client comes in with a whole different playlist. Then it is our job to meet the clients where they're at and adapt our dancing style for today. That's the whole beauty between, or for the awareness of our archetypes in ourselves and our clients, and seeing how do we find a match as opposed to wanting to force them to match ours. No, we adapt to meet theirs and then we lead them somewhere more useful. Anybody else? Go ahead.
For me, a framework, especially if something like Carol said, if somebody tends to dominate, wants to take the time and dominate and starts telling lots and lots of stories, it's being able to bring it back into, I can get taken with the story, but then looking at the framework to bring myself back in to say, so in view of all of that, what is it that you want to have happen here today? And also to make sure for me is so a tendency not to overrun, to stay within the boundaries of the agreed time so that I finish on time. and model that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Benny.
Yes. Aaron.
So I think having the platform of having a system, I think is massively important. And as I'm a kind of a multi-dimensional practitioner doing so many different things, I think it'll be really useful for me. One of the skills that I pride myself on is also recognizing within myself when perhaps I'm not the right fit for the client, or I may need to refer the client on to somebody who may be able to be in a position to also assist the client that I may be working with, for example, if it's in a nutritional capacity, whether it's in a, okay, I need you to get yourself a personal trainer because we need to look at some appropriate exercise or whatever it may be. I think having this platform will be really great and massive for me to be able to help recognize that not only in the archetype that's being presented, but perhaps also the archetype within me, to be able to help to facilitate that person through to where it is that they need to go to, because it's all about them.
Exactly. So 2 questions here that come out of that. Thanks, Aaron. One is this the client for me? Another way of saying that is, do I really want to work with this client? And it's really okay if the answer is no. You just need to communicate that. And the way to communicate that is not, I don't want to work with you. The response is, right now, I don't think I'm the best practitioner for you. Would you like me to help you find someone else? End of conversation. You don't need to explain that. There's no way you can explain it without inflicting hurt. And also your personal stuff that you struggle with, which you are allowed to, is none of your client's business. So it's not about saying, well, there's a mismatch in our energies and I find it really hard when you do that. No, that's all your stuff. You need to clear it. But in the meantime, it's really okay to say to your client, right now, I don't think we're a good match. And I would like to refer you. Would you like my help with that? Or would you like to find someone yourself? Right? Simple. But then the bit that Aaron also brings up, am I the right practitioner for the client right now? So I might want to work with them, but I might just be out of my depth. One of my regular clients, I've seen him for years. Every month he sees me once or twice when he feels like it between business trips. I have been saying to him for months, you need to get a business mentor. I never tell people what they need. I'm telling you what you need is you need a business mentor. I cannot be a business mentor for you. I'm not a successful business person with 200 people working for me like you are. You need to get somebody else. He's finally, after about 6 months of me cajoling him, he told me yesterday he's done some work and he's found a mentor. I can't be everybody to everything. Also, Aaron's comment about then referring people, not necessarily saying, I can't help you, let's refer you to someone else. But let's have the humility to appreciate that I might not be the be-all and the end-all. And in addition to my services, go see the chiro, go for the blood test, go see the psychiatrist, do whatever you need to do to supplement how we support the clients. Another conversation for another day. Just because energy psychology is the bee's knees doesn't mean it's the be-all and the end-all. For some people, it's not enough. You're looking at one right now. Energy psychology has never brought me long-lasting happiness and peace. There's always been other stuff that I needed to supplement it with. Does it mean EFT doesn't work? No, of course not. Does it mean there's something wrong with me? Well, you be the judge of that. Anybody else? Anything else? Benefits of a framework?
Also a beautiful safety net that you can always fall back on.
Yes.
Once you know the steps within that framework, you can become very creative and add a lot more depth to your practice as well. And whilst knowing that you can always still fall back into the steps of the process and
that's
framework.
That's it. So there's so many steps in this handout, in this workbook. There are probably more than 100 things that you can do. Different ways of saying things, different ways of speaking to them, different way of homework, different way of everything. That, again, as I say, initially it might be overwhelming. That's why we're going to do them step by step and practice some of them on the call so you can just go out and use them. Whenever you get stuck, the only thing you need to do is recognize which music's playing. Once you know how to do the foxtrot, you know how to do the waltz, your only job is to recognize which music is playing, and then you pull that trick out of the toolbox. It's a bit like spices. I don't really particularly enjoy cooking. My guess is, well, I know, at least some of you I know, because I've eaten lovely meals at your house. It's like looking at the spice rack and deciding, given that I'm cooking a vegetable biryani, these are the spices that I'm going to need to bring the best out of this dish. Given that my client is presenting with a lot of anger today, screaming, shouting, and swearing, not at me, just in life in general, or at me, these are the spices, these are the archetypal tools, processes, techniques, attitudes, energies that if I put them into the mix, is going to bring the best out of my client, given where the client's at. If you don't do that, it's a bit like insisting on putting barbecue meat spice in a vegetable biryani and blaming the biryani. Okay, it's just silly. We got to meet our clients where they're at and then use the most appropriate tool for what they are showing up with, despite whatever preparation or planning we've done. Time for a couple of more. Anything else? Benefits?
You can hear me?
Yes, Rob.
So it'd be empowering and confidence. I would have confidence and consequently feel relaxed, and it'd be more enjoyable.
It would be, and it is. I have said so many times in so many of my courses, the main difference between me and some of you, not all of you, but the main difference between me and some of you, my level of confidence in what I do. That's it. So you think, or some of you think anyway, I'm so amazing or whatever. And yes, on a good day, it might be amazing. But the point is, it can be amazing because I'm totally relaxed. I'm totally in the moment because I'm very confident. There's not a thing that can happen in a session that I don't know how to handle, including those things I have no idea how to handle. Once you have the archetypal framework, just like, this is showing up. So I need to use one of these 20 or 30 different ways I have to respond to that particular thing. Is there anybody else that hasn't spoken yet that would like to add something?
I think maybe having a framework helps you to feel like you're a little bit more prepared at the beginning. So
Exactly.
it's like you've got your toolbox sitting there with a few tools sitting in it, and you're going to know which tool to bring out at any time. So it's the confidence, as Rob said, but it's also that you feel prepared.
Exactly. I think that's a respectful thing to do, to prepare. And then again, as I say, there's the ongoing paradox between here's the agenda I had prepared for today's session versus, actually, this is what needs to happen for today based on what the client is presenting. So everybody again, take a nice deep breath in and out, stretch the body, stand up if you want to, move your legs, get some energy flowing. And then point to somebody on the screen and say, this is kind of interesting. There we go. Some muted. You're all muted. I modeled that well. All right, so let's turn to page 1 of the workbook. And then as you just have a look at page 1, hopefully you've all read that. We're going to go through this very briefly because I do believe that you can all read. In this moment, sit, take the posture of a queen. All of you, male and female, men and women. Take the posture of a queen and imagine addressing somebody from that place of being a queen. So find the posture in your body, check how you're sitting, what the energy is like, and notice what happens inside the body. How do you feel when you sit like a queen? Just kind of notice. Move the body if it wants to. Notice what happens. And then move into the posture of a young prince. So the attitude, the energy, the body posture, a young prince. And imagine what words might come out of your mouth and what you might be saying if you were indeed a young prince. Is it some attitude? Is it respectful? Is it exciting? Is it resentful? Just notice. And then the last one for now, take the posture of and embody the energy of a beggar, somebody who's begging. Sit like they might sit, or lie down even, or stand up. And take the posture of a beggar and feel what happens in the body and notice what happens in the mind when you take the posture of a beggar. Notice what happens to your energy. All right, so you can come back into your natural posture, stretch the body, take a nice deep breath in, out with a sigh. So I'm curious what happened in any of those three positions. The queen, the beggar, and the young prince. What did you notice in your body or in your mind when you did that?
What I noticed that was really fascinating to me, as soon as I moved from queen to prince, from female to male, I immediately took up more space. My arms went out, my hands went on my hips. I felt larger, like I was taking up more space in the world.
Wow. Thank you, Jane. That is interesting. Patriarchal world and all. Thank you. Anybody else?
When I was in the queen, I felt very regal. I felt that I just commanded respect just by virtue of being there. And as the prince, I went into a mode of, I don't want to do this crap. I don't want to be royal. I want to do something else.
Yes.
And the beggar was just very, very uncomfortable. The energy was very draining.
So notice the descriptions. Anybody else?
As the queen, I felt that I was like a benefactor. You're all my people and I shall be good to you.
Benevolent queen. Sweet.
Benevolent, that was it, yeah. But as the prince, I kind of had this feeling that everything should just come to me. And so I don't have to try, and you can just give it. And as a beggar, just immediately the word shame came into my head. It's like shame. And I looked up and everybody's head was down. There was that whole shame posture.
So it'll be interesting for me to hear from you the next time you actually walk past a beggar, just to notice if you might have a different response now that you have more of a sense. And I mean, some of you might have had that experience. I don't know. But I have more of a sense of what it actually feels like. It's time for one more. I want to share what happens.
So I'm able to have different thoughts when I step into that energy. The thoughts in my mind change. And it's not like I have to kind of try and think what thoughts would a person like this be having, and the thoughts just change.
I just get goosebumps when this stuff works so well. So, I mean, how is it possible? As far as I know, none of you have ever been an actual queen in this lifetime. As far as I know, none of you have been an actual prince. And as far as I know, none of you have actually been a beggar. How is it that your emotional state can change? Emmy spoke, for example, she just felt that she commanded respect without even doing anything. So in other words, how is it possible that your state of being changes? And then as Liesl said, the thoughts in your mind actually change. In other words, your way of doing will probably change. When you feel different and you think different, you likely do differently. How is that possible? And of course, the answer is because it's all archetypal energies. And as we said earlier today, they are universal. We all have access to them. There are an infinite number of them, right? We just focus on 4 for the purpose of sanity. We had to do all the archetypes. We would be here for a while. Get these 4 nailed, you can go 1,000,000 miles with these 4 archetypes. And we can step into them at a moment's notice. It took you a second or 2 seconds to step into that archetype. And then the thoughts and the feeling changed. So that's what we are talking about. And so that's the one part, you stepping into it. And then, of course, the other part, as we keep referring back to, is identifying what is my client presenting with. What's their body posture? What is their attitude? What is their energy? What is the words? What are they talking about? What are they actually doing in this moment that can help me identify which of the 4 they are in so that I can match my style with them? In other words, I need to pay attention and calibrate what music is playing so that I can adjust my style of dancing today. Otherwise, we will have a mismatch. So that's the challenge for us. If we look on page 1, the sentence that jumps out in the first paragraph, this is non-acceptance. What is non-acceptance is if at any point you want your client to be different than the way they are. I'm not saying it's wrong. We all do that. We all have expectations. Of course, I want my clients to be happy after the first tap, levitate, have money, sex as much as they want, the perfect bodies, whatever that means, and all that stuff. So just notice, though, that in wanting something better for them than they have, we're actually not accepting them where they are. And I believe that that non-acceptance interferes with the process of therapy. they are probably hard enough on themselves as it is for not being the way that they should be, the way they want to be. So let's be the exception and actually accept them exactly the way they are. Those of you not familiar with Byron Katie, I suggest you look her up, B-Y-R-O-N, Byron Katie, K-A-T-I-E. I know some of you are very familiar with her work. She's got a website called The Work, THEWORK.com, and she will challenge your mind to see where you are in resistance to what is. So one of the extreme examples that I have listened to her work is a mother who wanted her son to stop being a drug addict. Now, I mean, that's a reasonable desire probably for any parent, and still it's a statement of non-acceptance. He's not accepting the son for who he is, and in that moment in time, he happened to be a drug addict. So notice how subtle this can be, and just be open to the possibility that you wanting anything for your client that isn't true, yet at this point might be interfering with the process. And I believe that we all have a sense, a radar if you want. We're all apparently all connected. Nobody can really tell me what that means, but I think you have a sense of what it means. When there is non-acceptance, people withdraw. They either defend themselves or they withdraw. And when your client starts defending themselves against you, it's not going to help the process. And when they start withdrawing into themselves away from you, it's not going to help the process either. One of the things that I've heard most consistently in my client practice over the last 9 years is the apparent sense of non-judgment, complete acceptance what is. I hit my child yesterday. Okay. I smoked some dope yesterday. Okay. I hit my wife yesterday. Okay. I did some porn yesterday until my eyes popped out. Okay. I ate a whole chocolate cake followed up by banana cheesecake. Okay. Whatever. I'm just accepting you as a person. You're sitting here wanting my help. What else am I going to do? Oh, that's very bad. We spoke about this last week. Double cheesecake isn't good for you. No, like really, truly just accepting the client. They are hard enough on themselves as it is. They are disappointed enough in themselves that they fell off the wagon or did too much booze or drugs or sex or lost their temper again, whatever that stuff is. So let's really, truly meet them where they are and be curious as to what's really showing up. And in the context of the work we're doing now on these calls, be curious which archetype is showing up most in the way the client presents. The behavior that bothers them, this ongoing addiction, they stop smoking for a day and then they pick it up again. They stop smoking for a week and then they pick it up again. They promise themselves they're only going to have 2 cigarettes and they have 22. What archetype is playing out? Which archetype is wanting healing so that when that archetype heals, the behavior will dissipate? The queen that Emmy stepped into a while ago probably doesn't sound to me like she's an addict. She sounds like just the absence of addiction. She's just commanding respect the way that she is. So be mindful of where you don't accept your clients under the banner of, I care about them so much, I want them to be happy and healthy and all that stuff. It's still in a state of non-acceptance. And I know you know this, we talk about it a little bit more later on. Here is the fine balance. Some of you know that I've started exploring with DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which I find fascinating. And one of the biggest lessons I'm learning from DBT as a client, I'm observing it as a client, is this paradox between, or having to find a balance of accepting the client where they are 100% and challenging them to change on the other hand. And I think it is a very beautiful, I want to call it a tightrope, because we can easily go to one side or the other without really helping the client find balance. But just be more mindful, or be mindful of where your balance is in terms of accepting the client and believing that change is possible for them every step of the way. So when a client comes, and one of my latest clients is somebody who had these anger outbursts at work. So from the very first day I saw her, I believed absolutely she could be calmer at work, and I completely accepted it. Every week she came and told me she lost her temper. And then Friday, the message comes. I didn't quite notice this, but I was just having a meeting with my boss and it was quite challenging. And at some point he said to me, "Why are you so calm suddenly? What are you doing?" And she realized she'd been actually a lot calmer, and the anger outburst that would have been there in the past wasn't there. So the vision I had for her happened to have come through in this point. At the same time, every time she came and she was devastated that she lost her temper again, and people at the office are looking at her in a strange way, and she's getting the name as being the office bitch, all that stuff. I just empathized with her in the moment. Good. So the illusion of control, the next paragraph. You all know that what is, it's very spiritual, and people write books about it and charge fortunes for you to go to their workshops to teach you what is. We all know that it's true. It's just not always that easy to accept in the moment. Now, the second paragraph of the illusion of control in your workbook is what might happen if you give up the illusion of being responsible for or able to control your clients. Now, that's a big one for some of you, because some of you have a real sense of responsibility for your clients, and I make up that that's what makes your sessions less enjoyable and exhausts you by the end of the day. So again, back to the archetypal framework. If instead of being responsible for the client, you can appreciate that your only role or your main role is to look at the information that's presented, identify which archetype is most hurt and therefore wants most healing, pick the tool for the job, and then get out of the person's life and out of their business, I think you have a healthy, thriving practice that you love and enjoy, and hopefully charge some decent money for. The next one, swimming upstream or floating downstream. The summary of that paragraph is when there is a mismatch between where the client presents and where you meet them, it must and does and will bring resistance. It'll either bring resistance in the client. Listen, you all know what it's like not to be heard. You've all had conversations in your life where you weren't heard, where the other person was too busy thinking what they want to say next, or they misunderstood you, and there's just this. Or, sometimes you might go to have a conversation with somebody and everything you say, they bring back to themselves. Oh, let me tell you about what happened to me last week. I'm still in the middle of my story that you asked me about. So we know what it's like not being heard, not being truly met where we are, especially when we're upset and somebody else starts defending themselves as opposed to could you just listen to me for now? So I'm saying again, when there's a mismatch between how the client presents and where you're meeting them, there is going to be resistance. Now, I used to teach level 2 rapport, and it usually started off with saying, if somebody comes to your session, hyped up, angry, aggressive, swearing at the traffic, hating they couldn't get a parking space, upset because their boss was full of nonsense to give them the time off, and all that stuff, and they're like in a real tiz about everything, which is inflated warrior, and I meet them with lover, and I speak like Barry White, and I go, come now. It's not really that bad, is it? Life is good, and we should be grateful for everything that happens. If he hasn't punched me yet, I hope that he does, because I'm not meeting him where he's at. If I were to do that, and I exaggerate for effect, but we do this so subtly. It's not just for your clients, of course. You realize it's also for your kids and your partners and your friends and your business associates. It's when we can truly meet somebody where they're at that we have a chance of making a connection. And it's only once there's a connection in our therapy work that anything will actually shift and change. Clients will only go, some of you mentioned going deeper. The client will only go as deep as they feel safe. And it is your job. Your responsibility is not the client or their lives. Your responsibility is to create the safety. And again, I know I say the same thing as many times as I can, different ways as I can. When you can truly meet them in the archetype that they are present at the moment, that's when the connection can happen. And then it is a case of floating downstream as opposed to swimming upstream with the resistance that must happen when you're not truly meeting them where they are. On page 2, leave it unnoticed or untended at your own peril and your client's disadvantage. I'd like somebody to read the third paragraph, please, the third and the fourth one, starting with when you meet them with the confidence and flexibility of, and finishing with now that was easy. Somebody please read that.
When you meet them with the confidence and flexibility of, I can meet you where you're at, wherever that is. And it's okay that you are who you are, where you are. And I have what is needed to lead you somewhere more useful. And I'm going to make you right every step of the way there. That's when you become truly present for your client. Your unequivocal and true loving acceptance of who and where they are then become the catalyst for change. In that madly paradoxical, non-attached way of caring so much about them that you don't want anything other for them than what's happening for them, whilst at the same time remaining absolutely focused on their desired outcome of your time together. That's when your sessions become fun and flow, and the hour's up before you know it, and you sense the reciprocal appreciation for the time connected, and you think, now, that was easy.
Now, I would like to see by a show of hands, because I would find it very hard to believe that not every single one on this call has had a session or a conversation like that. So by show of hands, raise your hand if you actually know what I'm talking about there, right? Either a client session or a conversation with somebody, and it just flows, man. It just works. So that's what we stand to gain by understanding this archetypal framework very, very well. That's when your client energy sessions energize you, and by the end of it, you're like, bring on the next one. Next page, page 3, maps and models. Right, so the fourth paragraph or the second paragraph, archetypes or universal energies, we had different ways of describing them earlier today. For the purpose of this conversation further on, energy and energies and archetypes are used interchangeably. It's about stepping into a particular way of being, which then, as we saw earlier, brings on a different way of feeling and thinking, and that leads to a different way of doing. In other words, when I am conscious that my client right now is in the hurt lover space, then I step into the balanced lover. I use language in a specific way. I use the word and a lot. I repeat their words again and again. That is the way of meeting the hurt lover really where they're at. And as soon, most of you have done matrix reimprinting on this call. The step that baffles most people who are new to matrix reimprinting the most is how quickly the step of validation helps the client relax. The minute we can meet somebody truly in their pain or in their anger or in their rage or in their shame, and as soon as they feel connected, then we can lead them somewhere much more useful. The opportunities for us as practitioners, we already spoke about that. It's about recognizing in your clients where they're stuck, where they're hurt, where they need the most healing, you adapting your style accordingly, which is truly meeting the client where they're at and leading them somewhere more useful. Next page, page 4, archetypes as allies. So now we have a third component. The first one is the archetype that the client's in, that we need to pay attention to, like we pay attention to what music's playing. The second one is us stepping into the archetype that's going to be most useful for the client, depending on where they're at. And that leads us to the third component, which is as soon as we step into the archetype, as those of you that shared what happened when you stepped into the queen and the beggar and the prince, you access energies or attributes or qualities or wisdoms or intelligence and all of the above that the archetype presents. It's a bit like the spices on the shelf. You open this spice bottle, it brings a certain flavor and texture to the food that you're cooking. In other words, when you are really confused about what to do next in the session, you are in deflated magician. That's what's bringing the confusion. The deflated magician can only be confused. That's its job. Like barbecue spice has a job. It's supposed to flavor the meat to taste like whatever the barbecue spice tastes like. That's what it does. Says what it does on the tin. The deflated magician can only be confused. Now, if you recognize your client is confused, then they are in the deflated magician, and you need to put out a magician tool out of your toolbox so that you can first of all meet them where they're at, and then secondly lead them somewhere more useful. That's what I mean by this. The first one, archetypes as allies. Number one, understand what's really going on for someone and why they're acting the way they do. Now, I know that the main focus of this is to understand clients better, but also appreciate that once you have these skills, this will help you understand your partner better, your children better, your bosses better, the people that work for you better, and you can apply the same logic to everybody. My biggest wish, I suppose, from this work that we're doing is that you would start seeing people more as people and understand that just like you, when somebody's being an idiot or a rageaholic, all it means is in that point in time, they're accessing the energies of that particular archetype. And again, we can try and force them out of it or wish they weren't like that, which is a state of non-acceptance and rejection of where they're at, or we can accept that in that moment, that's where they are, meet them there and lead them somewhere more useful. Second point there is validate. Some of you know that I have a particular interest nowadays in borderline personality disorder. And the biggest cause, or one of the biggest causes for borderline personality disorder, is an invalidating childhood. Now, I don't have to tell you, we don't need a label to talk about that. You will know from the work that you're doing and the fact that you're a human being that an invalidating childhood has massive consequences. Let's talk about that briefly. Invalidating childhood, just shout out phrases or words. What do you think would be the impact on an adult or the symptoms of an adult that had an invalidating childhood?
Insecure.
Insecure, that would make sense. Anybody else?
Lack of self-worth. Lack of self-worth.
For definite. If you weren't valid as a child, why would you suddenly feel valid as an adult? Anybody else?
Indecisive.
Thank you, Sharon. There was a man speaking.
Approval.
What's that to you?
Yeah, obsessive and desire for approval.
Obsessive and desire for approval, for sure. If you want to prove, where else are you supposed to get it from? Anybody else?
Lack of trust.
Lack of trust. Carol? Oh, was that it? There was somebody else that spoke?
Yeah, I said shame.
Oh, for definite, for shame, right? So validating the client where they are. Sue?
Unconfident.
Oh, unconfident, definitely. So when we can validate, see what happens today in your life when you validate someone else's upset. You know, there's something called imago therapy. And one of my friends here in Cape Town, she's an imago therapist. She has a granddaughter. And the granddaughter went hysterically one day and they didn't quite know what was going on. So all Greta did was to pick up this child and validate her by feeding back to her what was actually happening, by saying to her, Granny can see that you're very upset. Granny can see that you're crying. Granny can see the tears down your little face. She said those 3 or 4 things, just validating the child stopped crying. Why? Because she was actually met. Granny didn't say stop crying. Granny didn't say everything would be fine. Granny didn't say I'm here to help you now. All she did was to validate. Please ever, ever underestimate the power of validating somebody. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Does not mean you have to agree with them. But find some space for their point of view and validate. They are feeling that way for a reason. Now, the other thing is about valuing and utilizing your client's strengths. One of the things I really love about the way that Cliff teaches this work, if we look at the 4 archetypes that we cover here, knowing there are an infinite number of them, if we say, let's say we check the lover and the magician and the king and the warrior. And we're going to go into each of these in a lot of detail as we go on. Just for now, let's, for example, say somebody's lover was very high. Well, that means they are in their emotions and they cry at a moment's notice and they just touchy-feely and they want to hug you every time they see you and they love sex and chocolate on the beach and red wine and fire in the winter and cuddles and hugs and cats and stuff like that, right? They're so lovery. I mean, you look at them and they start bawling, right? Cry through every movie, all that type stuff. And let's imagine the magician is kind of up there. Let's say the king is quite low. Now, if the king is low, we know low self-esteem is at the order of the day. Or rephrased, when somebody presents with low self-esteem, you know the king is low because that is what the low king does. And let's say that the warrior is also very low. And when the warrior is low, it means that they don't really have boundaries or they don't protect them. They don't really take action in the world. They're kind of more reactive than proactive and so on. Now, most people, including us as practitioners, might say, well, in that case, clearly, this lover that is out of balance, we need to chop it down a little bit. Let's get the client to rein in this lover that's just bawling at a moment's notice and does all these fluffy things. And let's see if we can bring the other ones up. Cliff says that's not the way to go about it. Because here we are invalidating the client and going, well, your lover is too high. You need to change it. There's something wrong with a high lover. What I love about Cliff says, no, people, let's keep this lover up here since it's up there anyway. Let's bring all the other ones up to the same level. Imagine how balanced that would be. Now you have a strong lover, a strong magician, a strong king, and a strong warrior. So in terms of valuing and utilizing their strengths, there is a lot of strength and wisdom in the lover. We need the lover to be a balanced human being. Because the lover is all about feeling in the body. When you don't have a good relationship with your feelings or your body, you can't access the lover. That's the work. When you haven't processed your grief and your losses in life, you will never be, let me rephrase. In order to be a highly balanced lover, you have to do your grief work. Why? Because that's just the way it works. We're going to talk about the gateway emotions for each of these. You don't have to worry about that now. But just plant this concept that we are helping clients to keep the strengths they have, and we are simply helping the other strengths to come up to the same level. Shift your own energy. We spoke about that. And once you step into whatever archetype is most useful, you can really truly meet them more where they're at, you and them. And then you can help them step into the archetype that's going to bring the most healing for them in their life as they go about. And here is the key again in the second last paragraph. In essence, you'll be able to dynamically and in the moment use the best way. So let's say you have a client that is low in sovereign energy, which means they have low self-esteem. Their life is probably going nowhere fast. They don't know what they want in their life. That'll be a deflated sovereign. Let's say you sit and think about this client. You go, oh, okay. You go through the notes in this workbook, and you realize that, oh, that's what it is. It's just it's a deflated sovereign. And my tools, when my client presents with deflated sovereign, is I go into balanced sovereign. And I say something that means I really see them. I might say, oh, you know what? I wanted to thank you today for always coming on time to the sessions. And you look really beautiful today. I love this dress you're wearing. Seeing them in a way and validating them is what a balanced sovereign would do. When we do that, so I can prepare that up front and go, okay, today my job is to be sovereign so I can see them, so I can bring the healing to their deflated sovereign. But here's the thing. If they walk in with an aggressive warrior, this is not the time for me to be the sovereign. I need to meet them where they're at first. This is why I said it's the same sides of the same coin, preparing and being in the moment. And our willingness to throw away all our preparation in a nanosecond based on what's actually presenting, it's one of the most fun things that I find in practitioner world. That I have spent time preparing something, but then the client comes in with something else, and my job is to weave and dance. I thought we're going to foxtrot today. Turns out we're not. Why? Because it's not where the client's at. So a real willingness to let go of all our own stuff. And in the moment, some of you said earlier when we spoke about archetypes, you step into them. Leslie spoke about it, having been the bitch and the kind one today, and that's just 2 archetypes. All of us have exhibited many archetypes even just today. Step in and out of them at a moment's notice. Clients do the same, and our job is to meet them every step of the way. Everybody take a nice deep breath in and out. Stretch the body. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms for 5 minutes. Discuss what we've talked about so far today. So invitation is on your screen. Please accept it. Get 5 minutes to talk between the 3 of you. Discuss what we've been talking about. See you back in 5. All right, welcome back. What did you discover or talk about?
How incredibly important validation is.
In what way, Lisa?
In so many ways. In our clients' work, it's often easier for me than with my relationships, other relationships, and just how it can calm the waters or deflate an argument, or just to give that little pause and validate where a person is at instead of jumping into rescue or fix, or because that says you're not okay the way you are, or it's not okay the way it is.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Anybody else?
I just noticed while you were talking about the different archetypes, the people I've met just over this weekend, and now, I was listening and validating, but now I'll have a understanding, hopefully, at the end of the course, of what archetype, whether it's inflated or deflated, and know what to do with them.
Perfect. Beautiful. Yeah, you will have that, Shirley, definitely. Anybody else?
Benny?
Dermot?
Yeah, we talked about validation and the accepting what is. And so I'd like to just, I'm not clear on how that boundary between accepting what is and taking them to where they want to get to, and holding the balance between those two things. Could you say just a little more about that?
Sure. So one of the phrases I love is both and rather than either or. So the best way I can describe it is this client that I'm recently seeing, we have one session left out of the 6. And her main desire, the reason she came to see me is she has these anger outbursts at work, which makes her unpopular. It freaks her out. She brings on a lot of shame for her. You know, it's just it's not ideal at the workplace to keep having emotional outbursts. So for me, in my head, I'm very clear that I believe that's possible. And I held the vision for her. In other words, I imagined. I allowed myself to think, well, of course she can have that. At the same time, every week she came back to me and she said, no, it happened again. No, it happened again. You know, yesterday was worse. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So we have more work to do. Complete acceptance in that moment. But then at the end of the session, I'm very clear that this is a homework you need to do before the next session if you want to change. So complete acceptance of what is. There's no judgment in the moment for what showed up. It's like, yeah, okay, so I accept you anyway. Give me your hand. Let's do some tapping. And here's the homework for you to change. Or give me your hand. We need to do some matrix right now to allow you to change. So I think it's easier than it sounds. I think we all do that in day-to-day lives. We really accept our friends for being the state that they're in, and we wish something better for them. So it's kind of does that help in any way, Dermot? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Benny?
Yes.
Can I maybe say, by validating doesn't mean that you accept necessarily the behavior, but by validating it, you actually open up possibilities for them to have insight in their own sort of archetypal structures, whether it's good or bad.
Exactly. And I would take it a step further to you. I would say that for me, now this is different with a partner, right? So if my partner, if I had one and he was smoking drugs, that's a different conversation. Or a child who's smashing your glasses in your kitchen, that's a different conversation. I wouldn't accept that behavior. But again, notice the illogicality of saying, I don't accept that behavior when the exact behavior is happening. It's kind of well, dude, it's happening, whether you accept it or not. So for me, that might be a deeper conversation. For me, in the context of this, given that our main focus is working with clients, and it's not something I can teach you how to do. I think naturally we all do that when we're in the archetype of healer, in the archetype of practitioner. For me, there is pure acceptance no matter what happens. So when a client comes here and says, I took some illegal drugs yesterday, or as a client has told me, I hit my wife yesterday, I completely accept that in the moment. Okay, so that's what you did. What difference would it make for me not to accept that if that's what's actually already happened? Now, if he says to me, and I'm planning to hit her again tonight, now we're having a different conversation. Now we need to work with that, if that makes sense. But for me, accepting the way that people are showing up in this moment, be that angry, upset, guilty, shameful, proud of themselves, whatever, and what they have done, I think the key is complete acceptance, because then we can see the person for the person and not see the person for the bad thing that they did. We all do bad things. Some of us are just smart at covering it up, or we do it so masterfully people don't even notice what we do. So that's just my take on that too. Carol?
What would your response be if he did say, well, I feel like I'm going to hit her again tonight? What conversation would you have?
So first of all, I would imagine that if he's come to see me, that he actually wants that behavior to change. Right? So, I mean, if a guy comes to see me and say, listen, I'm hitting my wife, but I don't want us to talk about that. I want to keep on hitting her. I'd say, I'm not the guy for you. I can't help you. It's like, I can't sit by and condone that behavior. I know it's kind of extreme, but the reason I mention that is I imagine that this person wants help. So I'll say, the next question. So now I become curious. Now I step into the magician. Now I am fascinated by a man who sits here in front of me and says, I want to go beat my wife tonight. That fascinates me no end. So I go into the magician and go, tell me more. What's that about? You want to hit her because? I mean, those are just 3 different ways that you can use the magician to get more information out. Because once we've got more information out, now also, do you see, my immediate response is then, oh, but that's not okay. That's not meeting the client where they're at. In this moment, he shares with me a desire to beat his wife. For me, my challenge is, and sometimes we have to challenge ourselves, is to actually meet him where he's at. And right now, he's a man who wants to beat his wife. I got to meet him where he's at if I want the possibility of a connection. And remember, the only purpose of connection, it says it in the handouts about 20 times, when we can meet the client where they're at, when there can be a real connection in the here and the now, we can lead them somewhere more useful. But by not accepting where they are, we cannot really create a bridge, and therefore we can't really lead them somewhere more useful. So for me, the best bet I have with that client is to go, oh, okay, cool, that's interesting. Let's see. As opposed to, oh my goodness, no, that's not really okay. What am I going to do with that then? You know, then there's no possibility for me of actually helping him. Yes, does that help, Carol, answer your question?
Benny, don't you think, I mean, it's semantics, but we're getting hung up on the acceptance thing. I think when you say accepting, you mean complete and utter non-judgment. That's what you mean when you say you accept whatever they say. Yeah. You're not judging them 1 iota. But it doesn't mean you're condoning what they're doing or that you're not going to help them try not to do it. Exactly. It's just a non-judgment.
Exactly. And maybe that was kind of part of your question also. I'm not suggesting, first of all, we can accept a client's point of view or anybody's point of view without agreeing with it. Fact of life. I can accept that you see it this way, and I can accept that I see it that way. That's life, right? Me insisting that you shouldn't see it the way you do is like, well, that's kind of a pointless exercise, because you're going to feel unheard, you're going to feel invalidated. Either your defenses are going to come up and you're going to attack me, or you're going to defend your point. Either way is not conducive for real connection and communication. So we are going nowhere very fast. And I think that's one of the main jobs, I don't know, but I guess, of relationship coaches and therapists, to actually allow the space where they can hear each other and accept that there are different points of view, different preferences, and so on. So absolutely. Make it clear. Thank you for the distinction, Monique. We're not talking about condoning behavior or even agreeing with a point. We're just saying in this moment, so here's maybe another way of saying that. Whatever you have done up to this point in time, whatever behaviors you have done and whatever thoughts you had or are having in this moment, I will continue to see you as a human being that is deserving of loving kindness. Maybe that's another way of saying it. Because the accept word, I agree, Monique, is very loaded, or can be very loaded. Any final questions as we start wrapping up for today? Questions or comments, observations?
Well, it's just made me a little bit more hungry to read more about archetypes.
Cool. Let it be so.
And, yeah, and I have a client who's using food to abuse herself at the moment. And when you were talking about the magician, going, yeah, cool, tell me more about that. And I think, yeah, that curiosity, and it just demystifies the whole thing. She's going to come in thinking, I'm the worst person in the world and I can't get it together, and I'm going to go, exactly. Cool, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Wow, let's work on that one. Let's have a look.
Exactly. So we're gonna go into The Lover next week. So I'll give that to you as homework to read. I appreciate that. It's another paradox. So I'm saying, on the one hand, whatever the client presents, let that inform us which archetype they're stuck in or strong in, and which archetypal techniques we should step into to best help them. At the same time, so it's the same sides of the same coin, generally, the archetype that we are most in as practitioners and therapists and coaches is the magician. Because the magician is where the intellect is, and the reason is, and the insight is, and the transformation and the change is, the hibernation of self, the introspection, all that stuff lies in the magician quarter. So we are, I would say, in the default position of magician, but we step into the sovereign, we step into the lover, and we step into the warrior as practitioners when we really need to. So Leslie, when you say she uses food to abuse herself, what I'm hearing is addiction. What I'm hearing is overinflated lover. There's no question in my mind that's the deal. So then we need to use lover tools. Now, your initial questions might be sovereign, might be warrior, magician even, and those would be great and valid questions. But understand that according to this model, she is hurting in the lover quarter. And based on the fact that she's hurting in the lover quarter, I am suggesting very likely there is some grieving work for her to do. At some point, she lost something or lost many things that she has not grieved yet. And again, we'll talk about the lover in more detail next time. But in my experience, and this is true of my own life, I started smoking at the age of 49. How's that for being crazy? I teach this work, right? I've eaten so much food over the last 3 months. If you go on a junk food binge for 3 months, it's fabulous. You can eat whatever crap you want. I took those as signs something has really gone on in the lover quarter in Benny's life. Well, duh, just lost the most beautiful relationship I've ever had. And I thought I grieved it, but apparently I hadn't. So using the symptoms of suddenly starting to smoke, I hadn't smoked in like 25 years, and eating as much rubbish as I can, taking that as, hold on, Benny, you teach us stuff. That is lover hurt. And the gateway to the lover is grief. So guess what? I'm grieving. I'm in the grieving process. And so far I'm still smoking and eating, but hopefully as the grief dissipates, at least I'm facing the work that I have been ignoring. So we can also use symptoms to point us to where we have emotional and personal work to do. Okay, good. One last time for now, you'll go into your breakout rooms. You have 3 minutes to have a discussion about today, and then we'll come back here to the main room and we will close out for today. So please accept the invitation on your screen. You got 3 minutes and then we'll close out for today. Alrighty, welcome back. It's time for us to wrap up. So we'll do a checkout 1 word. So that means there's no ands, full stops, hyphens, or anything else in between. 1 word. Unmute yourself and check out with your word now, please.
Curious.
Fascinated.
Everybody at the same time. Fascinated.
Fascinated.
Magical.
Excited.
Excited.
Yummy.
Informative.
Validation.
Accepting.
Curious.
Well, then, the only thing left for me to say is let it be so. I will be in touch today about the homework and the Facebook group and the recordings and all that stuff. So thank you just for playing full out and participating. I really, really appreciate that. It makes these things so much fun for me to play with. Wishing you well, lots of love. May the archetypes show up beautifully for you today. And if somebody annoys you endlessly, consider what might be really going on for them. See if there's a bit more compassion, perhaps. And if not, well, we love and accept you anyway. What's an upward? Hugs, lots of love.
Thank you, Bennie.
Speak soon.
Thank you.
Next week,
Bye.
same time.
Everybody.
Bye.